So we're going to introduce Josh Linville for our next presentation. And Josh is the Vice President of Fertilizer at StoneX. Growing up in northwestern Missouri on a family farm growing tobacco crops and cattle, Josh brings a unique perspective to the fertilizer markets. With over 20 years of experience in this industry, Josh has operated in roles that have given him market perspective. As a North American logistics specialist, US-based nitrogen producer, and general manager of commerce in Melbourne, Australia. Josh and his team, which spans the globe, have worked hard to educate the market on how to use the fertilizer future markets to not only offset price risk, but also to be able to sell produce to farmers much sooner. So we're looking forward to Josh's presentation, and please welcome.
So honestly, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. There's not been that much happening in fertilizer lately, right? Been kind of quiet out there, and I know how excited you guys are. You're Eastern Canada, you're a very unique marketplace. You're more reliant on the world than you are North America, and man, what better way than to have somebody from the U.S. come up and tell you what to do? So hey, listen, let's set some goals for this presentation. Number one, I'm going to go very, very fast. I've got a lot of slides with everything that's going on. I am going to glaze over some of this. I sent the slide deck in a PDF form to Heather last night, and she promised me, I look forward to every person in the room emailing me individually, asking me for these slides, because I don't have much to do the rest of the week, right? So all these are going to be there. This is going to go very, very quick. First thing I always have to show is this. You do have to read this. This is on the test later. This is just what our compliance department says, or makes us put up there, right? This is basically just sitting there saying, listen, I'm going to sit there and tell you all the points of view that I have, what I think is affecting the market, what is going on in the world, but ultimately, the decision is yours. The bank doesn't come talking to me if you make a decision based on what I say or what I don't say. And this is ag in general, right? I mean, 95% of our industry is great people trying to do better, trying to feed an ungrateful world, frankly speaking. But ultimately, that decision lies with you, and you have to own that decision. So let's talk about some of the biggest things that are happening around the world before we dive into the individual products. And number one of the big things that we've been looking at here recently is Canada continuing to block Russian fertilizers. This began at the beginning of the Ukrainian invasion. And so what these pie charts look at, on the left-hand side, you've got urea imports into Canada. On the right-hand side, you've got UAN, the two big products that you bring in that used to come from Russia. The bottom left pie chart and the bottom right pie chart for each one of those, that red is Russia. You don't see a lot of Russia in there anymore. So unfortunately, as long as the government continues to block Russian fertilizer and other Russian goods from coming into the Canadian market, you've cut off one of your most important and bigger suppliers in the world from a fertilizer standpoint. Typically speaking, less competition, higher prices. Not sitting there saying that the move wasn't right. I mean, we were right there in the mix of it when the invasion first started happening, right? We were stepping up. We need to stop doing business. Russia's terrible. How could we do this? And Canada stepped up and said, we're going to take the lead and we're going to block them. And Australia stepped up and said, we'll take the lead. We're going to block them. Even a lot of Europe said, we're going to block them. And then the U.S. people said, great. We'll go ahead and take some of that cheap product. We didn't step through. We should have. But unfortunately, it means that you guys, Australia, have got one of the biggest fertilizer exporters in the world blocked from coming directly. And you might be asking yourself, Josh, you're in Canada. It's not the U.S. anymore. We are still one market. It is still a North American marketplace. We do focus primarily on the U.S. numbers because it's easier to find. However, what happens in the U.S. matters to Canada. What happens in Canada matters to the U.S. So as we sit there and look at it, if we go ahead, we're still taking Russian product. But let's face it, we never know what Trump's going to do day to day. I wouldn't have told you Friday night I thought I was going to wake up Monday or Saturday morning to the Iran military being completely kneecapped. But that's what we got. So if all of a sudden the U.S. starts to cut out Russia, they are one of our bigger single urea importers. They are our second biggest potash importer. They are our single biggest UAN importer. About half of our UAN right now comes from Russia. If we block them, it's not just our price that's going to go up. It is all of North America. So we matter. We are, as much as we focus on our border between our two nations, we are one market. President Maduro. Boy, this seems like a long time ago, and this seems like it's fairly mundane with everything that's going on in the world today. U.S. was playing Pokemon, man, with dictators. We got to catch them all. We're really good at the game, it turns out. We've got the highest score for the world right now, 1. Listen, what does this mean short term? Not a whole lot. Unfortunately, it takes a long time to place new regimes in place, weed out the old guard, if you will, change the structure of the entire country. But if Venezuela can go down this path, you're talking about one of the biggest oil countries in the world. That typically means a lot of gas. That could mean major nitrogen production. That could mean Trinidad increasing what they're doing because they share a lot of waters with them. So this could be something that helps us out from a fertilizer standpoint, but this is going to be years and years in the making. And the one that's big on top of our minds right now, the Iran war. What does this mean? I woke up Saturday morning and basically just laid there for a second and thought, crap. I thought I was going to get some downtime. That couldn't be further from the truth. It's important to know who the biggest suppliers are of fertilizer in the world. When it comes from urea, right now, Qatar, Iran, and Saudi Arabia's numbers 2, 3, and 6 top global urea exporters in the world sit behind the Strait of Hormuz. Guys, that Strait of Hormuz is the most important body of water for energy, and as such, fertilizer. Right now, we've lost 3 of the biggest, and that's on top of the problems we already had. Anhydrous. Numbers 2, I think it's number 7, and then number 10, same 3 countries. Phosphate, you don't think of phosphate when you think of the Middle East. Phosphate world is controlled by 5 entities. Saudi Arabia sits behind the Strait of Hormuz. I cannot explain to you, and I cannot understate how important it is that we get that Strait of Hormuz opened back up and we get this Iran war finished sooner than later. And when I tell you there is not a worse time of the year this could be happening, I mean it. This is incredibly important, and I do not care where your farm resides. You could have somebody in Australia, from Asia, from the US, from Canada, from Europe to India. Everybody could sit in here and I'll tell them each one to their face, this absolutely matters to you. So what I'm typically used to, because everything in fertilizer is bad news, I'd sit there and start off and say, what's wrong with urea? But there for a little bit, things were finally looking right with urea. Supplies were getting better. Prices were starting to look like they were a little toppy. Things were starting to go down. Man, I knew better to get my hopes up. It just never works out that way. Iran completely submarined that whole thing. So let's go through it. And this is something that happened before. European production was suffering well before this whole Iran situation happened. And a lot of people look at Europe and they say, well, what does it matter? They don't really historically export a whole lot. They don't really import a whole lot. They're just on their kind of own island, if you will, from an S&D. And that's absolutely true. Until they got in with it with Russia on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Russia wanted to bring more product. Europe was moving to green space. They got into a little bit of a tiff. They shut down flows, and all of a sudden, somebody blew up the Nord Stream underneath the water. 3 of the 4 pipelines were destroyed. Still need to be repaired. Gas prices in Europe skyrocketed, as they would do. And unfortunately, this is where it gets important. They produce about 15 million ton a year of urea. And right now, we think that their production rate's around 75% of normal. That means, guys, there's 3.5 million tons of production that's lost, and it's a double-edged sword, because now all of a sudden you have European buyers who are out in the marketplace who should not be there. They are unnatural buyers, and that drives prices higher. And I get a lot of people sitting there saying, Josh, why would I care? Why do I care that the Dutch TTF was sky high and it was going lower, and now all of a sudden it's skyrocketed because of this entire situation in the Middle East? We don't depend on their pricing. We depend on things like Henry Hub and Canadian pricing. Our prices are low. Our inventories are great. I beat my head against the wall trying to explain to people, we are part of a world market. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, note that we are part of the global market. What happens with the world happens with us. And that's what we did. We finally made a chart to sit there and show what's going on. And most people know what the Henry Hub is, so that's what we show here. So this line down here that does relatively nothing, and that's basically every North American gas price out there. That's our gas value. Very mundane, very quiet, very low. It's a great case for why we ought to be producing more, but that's later. You look at this green line. I know we're in Canada, and I'm talking about NOLA, New Orleans, Louisiana urea values. But NOLA is to fertilizer as Chicago is to corn. It is our most liquid space. It's our easiest point to watch. So we watch that. And so you sit there and say, okay, A lot of volatility there, Josh. It's up and down to everything else. Well, this red line, that's your Dutch TTF. That is your European natural gas value, historically speaking, going back to beginning of 2021. I wasn't great in statistics back in college, but I can look at that graph and I can tell you which one has more correlation. Guys, right now, Europe is your swing producer. Where their gas price goes dictates what their production level is going to be, which is going to dictate what the global S&D is going to look like, which is going to dictate what the overall price is. I understand the desire that we want to price our stuff based on our gas. Trust me, my family is all in farming. I am not. I decided not to go back to it. My family still farms, and boy, Easter and Christmas and Thanksgiving are all really fun conversations on what in the world are you doing to these markets. But unfortunately, these things are outside of our hand. They are global in nature. So we got to watch Europe. If their gas prices do start to tank, we could start to see that production come back online. Low chance, but we could see it come back online. That could increase supplies, that lowers demand. That could be a great bearish event if it happens. Number two, Russian exports. Back in 21-22, you guys all saw your urea prices skyrocketing, didn't you? It's because of Russia. We thought with everything going on with them invading Ukraine that we were going to lose their fertilizer, all of it. I mean, you had McDonald's pulling out. You had Starbucks pulling out. And when those people will not sell you hamburgers and coffee, you've done something kind of wrong. The world thought we were losing one of the biggest suppliers of urea. Now, fortunately, they've actually increased their exports. The Russian economy runs on natural resource sales. And they figured out, hey, rather than selling the gas and things like that, why don't we upgrade into a finished good, which is a higher price, which brings us more money. And so over the years since 21, normally they're exporting about 7 million ton. They took a little bit of a step back in 22. 23, 7.8. 24, 8.8. 25, we think that they hit 9 to 10 million ton. Russia's actually providing more product to the world than what many people thought was possible back in 21, 22. Russia has been one of the few bearish events we've had. They've been one of the helps. And I know it's weird to say, but Russian exports have been one of the things keeping the top end out of our pricing. Chinese exports. Man, you can't talk fertilizer if you're not talking about China. So if you look at China, they normally export between 5 and 5.5 million ton. And the issue is back in 22, prices were skyrocketing, inventories were getting tight, countries were starting to keep tons in, not allow exports. China's communist. What's the biggest danger to a communist government? It's not an outside power. It's not capitalism. It's an uprising by their own people. Well, what percent of, well, let's put it this way. What do you think, what industry covers the most number of people in China? It's agriculture. So if you are a government who might be afraid of your people and you want to make a lot of people happy with you really, really quickly, keep your tons at home. The Chinese government started to restrict exports with two goals in mind: ensure adequate supplies for their farmers and ensure lower domestic prices than the rest of the world. And unfortunately, they put that into place and it worked like a dream. And they've been doing it ever since. This came to a head, remember, 5.5 million tons normal exports. 2024, 262,000 ton is all they sent out. Last year, great bump higher. Now, they didn't do much of anything January through June, but all of a sudden July, they started to come back and they started to increase their export quota and everything was looking good. They ended up very near 5 million ton. Last year was almost a normal year. And this is why I started to get a little bit more of the side to the point where I was like, hey, I think these prices can start to finally go lower. We can finally get some wins from a farming perspective. Unfortunately, the government has come out and said in 2026, we are not going to allow exports to happen until August at best. And guys, if this situation in Iran is still going on, if the Middle East is still struggling, if Europe is still having problems and everything else out there, why would the Chinese government allow more exports to go? So China's a wild card. China's somebody that we need to watch and see what are they going to do and what are they not going to do. So one of the biggest things I always tell people, when China is participating in the market, they are the boogeyman. Everybody's scared of them. You might miss out on business with them. Get aggressive with your price, undercut them. But when they're not there, the mice will play. Bullish factors start to play in a whole lot more, and that's where we're at today. And the war. This is the one that's completely devastating, and people, I keep getting, I was talking to the Washington Post yesterday in O'Hare Airport, and they're like, well, how do you put a value on what's going on? It's like, I literally don't know how to put a value on this if the Strait of Hormuz remains down for 3 to 4 weeks. I cannot comprehend, because you've turned the world into a situation that is so ill supplied that it's turned into a situation of like, who is the best farmer in the world? Who's willing to pay the most for the few tons that are out there? There will be rationing. There's not enough to go around, guys. So as you look at it, we're focused on the Strait of Hormuz. Yes, the war is in Iran, and yes, we've got all these proxy attacks and everything else, but what it really comes down to is the ability to sail ships through the Strait of Hormuz. That body of water is very, very narrow. It's very easy with Iran controlling the entire northern part of that waterway to attack vessels coming through. And Iran isn't dumb. They know what the capability of the U.S. and Canada and Western powers are. They know they can't fight that. What they can do is hurt our economies. And they attack ships. And the world is focused on oil and gas and all these energy products everybody uses every day. But guys, 1/3 of all the urea exported in the world moves through the Strait of Hormuz. The longer that body of water is shut down, the more apt we are to start shutting down production within the Persian Gulf because they have nowhere to go with their product. And the tons that we lose today, we will not make up before spring season. And that's why we saw prices up $150 a ton, short ton USD in the Gulf, between Friday at close of business and Tuesday at close of business. The longer this goes on, the more hurtful it's going to be. Now, fortunately, Western powers have all stood up, and we've really crippled Iran's military capability, their offensive capability. And Trump came out, I think it was yesterday, saying, hey, we will provide insurance to the vessels willing to sail through the strait. We will provide you with a military escort. We are going to provide an iron curtain across the Strait of Hormuz. All you've got to do is stay on the opposite side of our warships, and we will protect you. Urea prices started to come down. It looked like we finally had hope. Unfortunately, every vessel carrier and every vessel owner said no. It's still too hot. It's still too dangerous. Yes, you've done a great job of taking out Iran, but we do not trust that we can sail through there. I will not put my ship and I will not put my crew in harm's way. That strait is still shut down, guys. That means we are losing 1/3 of the global exporters. And then India is somebody that was really talked about. I'm going to skip over it just because for time's sake, right? We're already 15 minutes in. I've barely even gotten through urea. When I look at urea, the biggest watch points I have today, and these are all global in nature. Number one is obviously the Iran war. How quickly or how long does this thing drag on? And really for me, it comes down to that strait. The longer that is shut down, the more hurtful it's going to be to our pricing. Russia versus the world. If all of a sudden Russia, they're still in Ukraine. That's kind of moved through the news cycle. We don't talk about that, but that war has been going on for years now. Russia knows that they are one of the most important nitrogen, phosphate, and potash producers. If I were Putin and I really wanted to stick it to the Western nations, it's not going to be from a military standpoint. I'm going to stop my fertilizer exports. I'm going to starve people. So we got to watch Russia versus the world in that relationship. European nitrogen approach, I don't think that we'll ever see that production get back to 100%, but it's something we do need to watch. And then China. China's always a part of the conversation. So as we go forward, like I said, yesterday it did look like there was a chance that we were going to see the Strait of Hormuz open. If we'd gotten, vessels starting to go, it would have been a great thing and prices were starting to go down. It's kind of like when you watch a documentary about Africa and you get all the wildebeest or whatever, they're getting up to the water and everybody's like towing it, boy, I don't want to go, there's crocodiles there. As soon as the first one go, everybody's like, crap, run! I was really hoping we'd see that happen with the urea vessels. Haven't seen it so far. Nobody's taken that first step into the water. How long that thing stays down is going to dictate what happens. So how are Canadian imports sitting? When you look at it, Canada usually imports about 1.2 million ton. Now, obviously, you guys bring in a lot of stuff from the rest of the world coming in through your ports. The U.S. and Canada share kind of a north-south situation as far as trade. We ship a lot of urea up to you guys in the east, and you guys ship a lot from the west, from your production down to our western, like Pacific Northwest, down in California, things like that. So far through December, which is where our data runs through, as far as the official goes, we're doing okay. How January, February, and March have been are going to be very important, but April is the most important. And the problem is, and this is what I try to always tell people, if you load a vessel, let's just say those tons are coming from the Middle East, and if you look at it, not much of your guys' stuff does, right? Qatar is one of the smaller individual countries out there as far as your imports. Most of it comes from the U.S., Algeria, Egypt, places like that. But if you were to load a vessel today and the strait were opened, that's going to take that vessel 30 days to sail around and get up to here, hit Canadian shores, hit U.S. shores. And that's why it's so important that thing reopens back up. The tons that are not shipping today are tons that are supposed to be hitting in April, which is our most important timeline for North America imports. So fortunately, everything was looking pretty good. North America as a whole, we feel, are sitting ahead of schedule as far as imports go. We think we've brought in more because there was kind of a slow period for demand. But it's not everything we need. Now, this is one thing I do like to show. Again, this is very U.S.-centric, but this shows that dark blue line at the bottom. That's our domestic production in the U.S., and obviously Canada has your own production as well, right? That light blue is what we import. And I just went over how Canada brings in about 1.2 million ton per year. And the reason I show this is the difference between that dark blue line and that red line, which indicates our demand. There's a pretty big gap. That's about a 5 to 5.5 million ton gap. And I always bring this up because I never know who's going to be in the audience, just in case there's a politician or somebody with a politician's ear or something like that. We've got a situation where Russia's one of our biggest nitrogen suppliers, and I don't trust them. We've got a situation in the Middle East where fighting is going on. We don't know if we're going to get product from there. I don't trust that. North Africa production is suffering because Israel shut down their gas fields because of fear of retaliatory strikes by Iran. That's going to shut down Egyptian product to a certain extent. Don't trust that. Guys, China's not exporting. Don't like that. A lot of the world's production is in danger right now. And we have some of the cheapest gas in the world. We have some of the best gas supplies in the world. And you can say what you want about, our politicians, your politicians, but when you look at it, our governments are some of the most sound in the world. Okay, you want to go the environmentalist route with me? Fine. My youngest just got done getting his Eagle Scout Court of Honor. I live by the motto, leave the world in a better place. Not that it was in a terrible place, but I want to live in a better one. I'm all for cleaner production. Just because we put production halfway around the world does not make it clean. Just because you can't see it out your back door doesn't make it clean. We can set our standards significantly better than the rest of the world. Why are we bringing this in? Why are we dependent on the rest of the world for the nitrogen that we need to grow the food to feed the population that's out there? We need to be looking at increasing our production here at home. Sever that umbilical cord to the rest of the world. And one thing I do a little bit differently, I know this is corn. I'm sorry, I'm a corn guy. You got to deal with it. When I look at prices of fertilizer, I look at prices of grain. I don't like looking at the prices. That's emotional. If I look at corn, and right now December 26th is trading around 470, and if I sit there and say, hey, 550, is that a good number? Most people say, yeah, that's a great number. I wish we could get there. Now, most people won't sell it if it got to 550 because we're waiting on 6, right? But 550 would be a pretty good number. Well, the problem is if urea right now is just say 575, 600 in the Gulf, and you sell 550 corn, and all of a sudden that urea price jumps to $800, $900 a ton, that 550 doesn't look so good now. Same thing if I buy my fertilizer and all of a sudden corn prices go down to 350, that's not a good situation. And I always wondered why the grain originators complain so much that farmers won't sell ahead, and it's ridiculous, and why won't they do it? It's because selling your grain without buying any of your inputs is more speculative than doing nothing at all. So something we look at, and I'm kind of weird, I look at farming, marketing as manufacturing. It's inputs and outputs. So rather than trying to sit there and say, well, I'm going to call the low of the fertilizer, I'm going to call the high of the grain price, because if you're doing that, quit farming. You can make a lot more money. None of us are that smart. None of us individually are smarter than the marketplace. But we look at it from a standpoint that what's the value between how many bushels of corn or canola or beans or whatever the crop is are we using to spend on that ton of urea? And ultimately what it comes down to is less is better. It doesn't matter what the prices are. In this situation, back in the summer of 2023, the corn urea ratio dipped down to about 55 bushels of corn per 1 ton of urea. And at that point, everybody was sitting there saying, Josh, boy, corn looks like it's going to keep going up. And man, urea keeps looking like it's going to go down. It's going to get better. This is just going to continue on forever. And we were stamping our foot and saying, guys, the value we are today is some of the best we have seen in a very, very long time. We need to be locking in layers. And all of a sudden, we started seeing situations where, you jump up here. It was 155 bushels. You look at where we are today with prices where they're at, this dotted line is the futures market. Today, that number sits at about 120, 125. I would rather look at the value between these two products. The farming community has the unique ability to take the inputs, sell the output, and actually lock in that value that's in the middle of it. And this is a small part of your operation. I know this is only one little piece, but we have people that do it with diesel fuel, all their fertilizers. Any sort of an input, they sit there and say, well, what's the historical difference to my output? And unfortunately, what this tells us today is prices are very high, and I think it gets worse. And where we're at today, there's only been 3 times in history where it's been worse than what it is today. It was 2008, and then this most recent super cycle in 2022. So UAN markets, same thing. They had been struggling quite a bit, but all of a sudden it pales in comparison to what's happening in urea. But don't you worry, the market is going to sit there and take the UAN price up if the urea goes up as well. It's not going to let a travesty go to waste, not if they can make money on it. So you look at it, European production matters just as much as the urea situation does. 75% operating rate today, base is normal. The problem is they normally produce about 9.5 million ton of UAN. That's about 2 million ton that's not being produced on an annualized basis. And 2 million ton to the UAN market is significantly bigger than 3.5 million ton of urea is to its marketplace. UAN, globally speaking, is a much smaller market. You look at it, it's easy to move dry goods, right? You stick it in a bag, you stick it in a cart behind a mule, you drag it out to your farm, you stick your hand in the bag, you throw it out on the field. It's what you see when you see stories about Asia and things like that. It's a person throwing that stuff out of the bag because it works for them. It's easy to do. You know what you don't see? Somebody grabbing a 5-gallon bucket and sticking their hand in and flicking it on each one of the plants as they go down the field rows. Liquid's harder to move. So it's really comes down to first world countries that use it. You need the technology, you need the storage. It's a unique product. But 2 million ton matters far more significantly to UAN. And it keeps the world tight and keeps Europe looking. And guess what they do? They go and they look to Trinidad, who has their own production problems. They say, well, I can't fill all your needs. Well, they jump over to the U.S. They go to our Gulf Shore producers and they buy up those tons. And guess what? Those tons are supposed to be for North America. You remove those, it's easier for that price to move higher. Again, we are one market. Trinidad, like I said, production problems there. There stems from gas supply issues, and unfortunately there's not a short fix. Now Trinidad has been working on trying to expand their untouched gas fields out in open waters, territorial waters. They've approved it, they're going forward with it. This is where the whole Maduro-Venezuela situation pops in. They've not been allowed by Western countries to start developing those waters because it's going to help Venezuela. Now that Maduro's removed, we might be able to start seeing some more progress. This is going to take time, but right now Trinidad continues to suffer. There's some production plants that are just offline. There's others that continue to suffer off and on. And when the European producer can't produce it, they are still going to buy. They're not going to sit there and say, well, shucky darns, we're not producing it this year. I guess we'll just go without. They're going to go fight. And they're going to go to Trinidad and they're going to say, I'm sorry, I don't have you. And then they come up and they take our tons. They're Trinidad, third largest exporter, even with the production problems that they've had. That's how important the country is. And really, again, you need to know who the big players are out there. It's not too many on this list, is it? Not many people out there, not many countries in the world control most of the UAN production. U.S. is not helping any situation. The way we've been going about it, we are very, very highly reliant on Russia for our imports. 1 out of every 2 tons of our UAN imports comes from Russia. While I still cannot fathom why we have never tariffed Russia, I mean, we have tariffed almost every country in the world, including Canada, but we didn't Russia. That makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't understand what the man is thinking. I don't need to know. All I know is that Russia is allowed to continue to come. But if all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you see President Trump has gone ahead and sanctioned or tariffed or dutied or whatever Russia fertilizer, half the imports coming into the U.S. are gone. I don't care where you sit in North America. There is going to be an impact because the market is going to try to replace those and there's not enough time to do that. And then the same thing. You guys have blocked them. If you look at the pie charts before you guys put those restrictions in place, Russia's a fairly major player. Fertilizer year 2021, about 13% came from there. 2020, about 22, 23% came from there. Today, 0 comes from there. If that lane could be reopened, you're reopening one of the bigger suppliers in the world. But that's for the Canadian government to dictate. And please watch this. Last spring, spring 25, We experienced the nightmare scenario in the fertilizer market, the thing that we've always cried about, yelled about, warned about, the thing that could finally happen. Not enough supplies to go around. And you talk about a boy that cried wolf situation. Farmers everywhere were just like, shut up. You talk about this all the time, and it's always there. It never happens. The wolves showed up last spring. And I don't know if it was the case here, but there were large parts of North America who were coming back to us during the middle of spring season and saying, I can't find product. This is not a matter of me being too proud and not wanting to buy from certain people. This is not a matter of me not being willing to pay the price. It does not exist. We got through it. We survived. We do what we do in ag. Somebody punches us in the face, we figure out how to just move beyond it. We got through the season. The issue is fertilizer year 26 was already in a worse spot than fertilizer year 25 was, that resulted in the outages last spring. Our inventories were low to start the year. Exports could have been larger based on European demand. If we had blocked Russia, that was going to cut half of the U.S. imports, and Canada's already blocking Russia. Domestic nitrogen plant downtime, that's a big conversation this year. It's not a malicious downtime. These plants are high pressure, high temperature. It's hard on equipment. I worked a couple years for Coke, and guys, it shocked me to my core how often these plants had to shut down because of breakage and repairs and things like that. It's just a part of the process. And then demand continues to remain large. I'm not saying we're going to repeat this. I will not cry wolf, but I am telling you, you need to watch for the wolf this spring. We need to be a little bit more on the front foot, because we are our starting line for this fertilized year was significantly closer to the finish line that was spring of 2025. Inventories are tight. Even though the focus is on urea, UAN inventories are still very tight. Canada is still banning fertilizer from Russia. That's a major impact on the UAN side. So the watch points for me when I look at look at UAN, you got to watch Europe. That's a big part of it. Trinidad is obviously another big chunk of it. The U.S.-Russia relations, and frankly speaking, you can add Canada in here as well. If the Canadian government suddenly said, listen, we're going to give an out for fertilizer, we will allow fertilizer from Russia to come here, I think that could be a major help very, very quickly. But ultimately, it's a UAN price in relation to urea. If the price of urea goes higher, UAN is going to follow suit. If the price of urea starts to go drastically lower, the UAN market's going to suddenly be like, I don't know what you're talking about, this whole correlation. Why would my price go down? But I'll just sit there and say, with everything going on with urea, there's more upside than there is downside with this situation. UAN will not let an opportunity to make more money go to waste. So UAN stays connected. What happens with urea is going to dictate the terms of what happens with the UAN. And please watch the inventory levels. Have the conversation with your supplier. Canadian imports, I show this graph kind of tongue-in-cheek. Over here on the left-hand side, it shows, oh, we're a little bit ahead. That's good. We're a little bit ahead. But bear in mind, through December, you guys' cumulative total of imports is only 60,000 ton. It's not a big number. It's not a make or break. It's still very, very reliant on domestic production. And most of that import, it still comes from the U.S. and a little bit from Lithuania. And the same thing from the production, just in case this ever gets in the right hands. As far as the U.S. perspective, while we produce most of the stuff that we need, we could still produce more. We could still reduce that reliance on places like Russia that we claim to hate and not want to do business with. And again, when you look at this ratio, you look at where the value is today. NOLA UAN at the time when I updated this last night was 390. I would dare say it's probably over 400 this morning based on what I'm seeing around the world. December corn is certainly not doing us any favors. None of the grains prices are. So that ratio currently sits at about 83. That's going to put you at this line right here. It doesn't get much worse from where we're at today. It can get worse, but we've not seen much worse in the past. Anhydrous, same thing. We were already in bad shape from an anhydrous standpoint. The Middle East situation only makes a bad thing worse. Number one is it's lack of Russian exports. And the problem is Russia used to be the single largest exporter of anhydrous, about 4.4 million tons. Fast forward to 2024, well, they fell all the way down to number 8. Well, what happened? It turns out that when your pipeline to export anhydrous from your production facility down to port facilities that loads it onto vessels and out to the rest of the world, when that pipeline runs through the country you are actively invading, your flows kind of shut down. Ukraine shut that stuff down immediately and said, no, if you're going to try and invade us, we're not going to do business with you. they lost their capability to export. Now, fortunately, they have built facilities, one up around, St. Petersburg, it's called Ust-Luga, and another facility down around Taman, east of Crimea. Ust-Luga has been exporting some product, but the problem is they have a problem with ships having, we're going to say, malfunctions in the way of explosions. And Taman sits just east of Crimea. And Ukraine has showed an incredible ability to strike targets within Russian territory. And if you've ever ran anhydrous, you know how dangerous it is if you're pulling a toolbar through the field and a little hose breaks. Reason why my dad would never let me apply it. He's had too many stories where he's had to jump out of the tractor, run upwind, run uphill, barely made it out. Think about a facility that exports, it loads it onto vessels and sends it around the world. We're not talking, a few, 10, 20 ton in a tank. We're talking thousands and thousands of tons sitting in storage. And if Ukraine decides, I'm going to stick a drone on the side of that thing and blow it up, the environmental and the personal impact would be devastating. So, unfortunately, bad way of saying it. Well, unfortunately for the global anhydrous market, until the Russia-Ukraine war comes to a close, we are still without our largest supplier. Europe, again, 75% production rate. Skip over that. It reduces more tons. Trinidad production rates, same thing. Gas supply issues means that their production rates are down, which takes out supply, pushes that demand elsewhere. In the Iran war, like I said earlier, the Iran war, the Strait of Hormuz is incredibly important for anhydrous. 3 of the top 10 global anhydrous exporters sit behind the Strait of Hormuz. And until that strait reopens, those plants might as well be on the moon. They're not accessible to us. They don't have secondary export facilities. Iran, Saudi Arabia will try and pick it up. We don't know how quickly Iran will be able to restart their production once the war is done. What's been the impact of their gas fields, of their oil fields? What's been the impact of their nitrogen production facilities? We won't know that answer. So anhydrous already losing its biggest supplier, and Europe as a whole reducing a lot of tons out there. Well, now we've just lost 3 more of the top 10. So watch Russia's ability to export, or lack thereof. You need to watch the Iran war. That's the single biggest thing right now that should be in your mind. When I wake up in the morning, I check the news to see what's going on with it. When I get to the office, I check the news. When I get a break in the morning, I check the news. When I go get coffee, I check the news. I go to bed at night, I check the news. That's what needs to be done. Current anhydrous values, they feel very, very high. I would like to sit there and say we should see more corrections, but with everything going on in the world, there's no reason in the world these manufacturers need to drop their price short term going into spring season. They hold every card in this deck right now. It is a lopsided game. Phosphate. Phosphate, it is important to note, globally speaking, 5 countries control 85 to 90% of the export of the production that's out there. And those countries are Morocco, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. Yes, Jordan, Australia, places like this, yes, they produce some tons, but when you look at the chart, those 5 control most of it out there. It's a very easy market to watch if you understand that this is what controls the marketplace. So let's talk about what all is wrong with phosphate, because I know if you're using phosphate, you already know something's wrong because of the price, right? Well, number 1, China. I talked about how China isn't going to export urea until August. They've done the same thing for phosphate. And the issue is, this has continued to get worse. China is normally your world's largest supplier. They weren't on that top 5 list because that top 5 list was 2024. If you go back to 2020, 2021, they were exporting somewhere between 8 to 10 million tons per year. Well, 2023, they did the same thing. We're going to stop exports. We're going to take care of our own people. I don't care what happens to the rest of the world. Their exports dropped to 7 million ton. Well, that worked really, really well. 2024, we're going to drop it more, 6.6 million ton. Well, that worked really, really well. Last year, this is the chart that we're looking at, 2025. They exported practically nothing January, February, March, April, May. Guess what happened to global prices during that time? They skyrocketed. India was buying nearly every single day, trying to catch up on their stockpiles. And the world looked at it and said, the world's biggest supplier is absent, not exporting anything. And one of the biggest world buyers is trying to play catch up with government money. Every time India made a purchase, it was like a cash register went off. And the price of that stuff went up 10, 15, 20 bucks every single vessel sale. Fortunately, China came back, and this is where we started to see a little bit of a reprieve on prices, right? The farmers in the market was finally right. Prices turned over. But the problem is in 2026, China's come out and said, we're not going to export again until August at best. If the situation in the Gulf is still going on, if supplies are still the way they are, there's no guarantees that they come back in August. Guys, if them being gone January through May caused prices to do what they did first half of 2025, what do you think they'll do this year? India playing catch up most of 2025. Again, for sake of time, let's jump over this one. U.S. government, don't worry, guys. If a bad situation is out there, the U.S. is going to make it worse. That's what we do. And unfortunately, this does affect Canada as a whole, right? Now, fortunately, you guys are able to bring your stuff in from the rest of the world, but this affects most of Canada out there. Again, when you look at the top 5 list, well, what have we done? Well, Morocco, we've got countervailing duties in place. Morocco refuses to bring a product to the U.S. marketplace until that rate is 0. We're currently starting the countervailing duty review. It's 5 years. It's time for a sunset review. Unfortunately, the history of our countervailing duties, very, very few of those get overturned. Hopefully, there'll be some political pressure. This Trump administration has talked more about fertilizer than any other administration I've ever seen in my lifetime. But I doubt it. Number 2, China. There are still tariffs in place there, and frankly speaking, why does it matter? They're not exporting. They're not a participant until probably August at best. Saudi Arabia, we actually had tariffs on them up until later last year when the Trump administration removed fertilizer from those tariff considerations. Russia, countervailing duties, the same thing as Morocco. And then U.S. production continues to suffer. We made a bad global situation significantly worse because right now, 3 of the 5 biggest exporting countries in the world cannot target the U.S. And what happens in the U.S., a lot of that product flows up to meet central and western Canada, and that has some spillover in the eastern side of Canada. This is making a bad situation much, much worse. And our production rates, like I said, they continue to suffer. And a lot of people will look at this graph and say, oh, wow, I wonder what happened. Production levels used to be really, really good. We had one quarter here where it hit 75%. That was a low. And all of a sudden, you get here to about Q1, Q2 of 2021, and production all of a sudden can't even maintain 75%. It's 60s. It's 65%. Well, gee, when did the countervailing duty rate go into effect? Right about here. The problem is, if you go down to Florida, and actually that's where I'm going today. I'm heading down to Orlando as I'm done here. So if you see me run out the back, I'm sorry. I'm trying to catch a flight. But the reason why is that Florida does not run on phosphate production. The state of Florida runs on 3 things. It is people going to the beach to swim in the waters. It is people going over to the East Coast to watch rockets take off. It's a very cool experience if you ever get the opportunity. And it's people going down to see Mickey Mouse. Tourism dollars runs the state of Florida. How do you think phosphate mining looks in the face of tourism? It's not even the top 5. It's not even the top 10. So the phosphate rock quality that Mosaic has access to has continued to dwindle. They're doing the best they can with what they have. But unfortunately, it is a failing phosphate rock reserve, and there's nothing we can do about it. We need to find more rock, and unfortunately, that's not been found in North America. And then you talk about plant gate cost. Everybody's sitting there saying, well, they must still be making a massive amount of money with the way this market is set up. No, they're not. Because anhydrous prices are skyrocketing globally based on all the stuff we just talked about. The other thing that we haven't talked about, I'm not a sulfur guy, but prices there have also been skyrocketing. I parrot what other smart people say, and the people in the sulfur market have said the reason for it is you're seeing a lot more demand for mining of like precious metals like zinc and all this other stuff. Sulfur used to be a market that, depending on the time of year, it would go from, if I'm the supplier, you're going to pay me for the product, and then next month I may pay you to take the product. Now that yellow bar is a massive part of it. So even with the price of phosphate where it is, and I know it's very easy to point a finger at the manufacturers and say, you jerks, you're taking advantage of us, they're actually losing money. And if we were to reset this market much lower than where it's at today, which doesn't seem feasible in the short term, I'm afraid you'd see production curtailments. They're not making money at these kinds of prices. Baffling as that may be. Iran war, it shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. Like I said, when you look at it, Saudi Arabia sits behind there. They might as well be in the moon right now. They cannot get their product to the rest of the world, and it's the most important period of the world to get their product out to us. So when you look at the world of phosphate and you scratch your head and you say, why is the price as high as it is? Look at your top 5. China, government dictates you're not going to export until August, and it's China. You don't go against them and get a slap on the wrist. You go against them, and you and your mom and dad and your kids and 6 generations are going to break rocks for the rest of their lives. You do what the Chinese government tells you to do. Exports are gone from China until they say so. Saudi Arabia is stuck behind the Strait of Hormuz. They might as well be zero today. Russia, same thing. There's a lot of fear that we might lose some production there, we might lose some exports there if we go the wrong way. U.S., our own operating rates are low. Guys, phosphate is in a very, very precarious position right now, and that is why your price is as high as it is. Now, fortunately, high prices cure high prices. There is hope on the way. Norway found a massive phosphate rock reserve, and it looks like they're trying to go after it. They're going to have a lot of roadblocks they got to get to, but that's what they're trying to do. Saudi Arabia is increasing if they can open the strait. Egypt is trying to increase. Morocco is trying to increase. Australia is trying to increase. All of these nations want to increase it and help offset the bad situation we're dealing with today. But unfortunately, these projects are not measured in days. They are not measured in weeks, and they are not measured in months. They're measured in years. It takes time. Hope is on the way, but you got to be patient. So watch points, it's a lot. It's the whole list. It's the Strait of Hormuz. It's China's exports. It's global tariffs and how that changes supplies out there. The U.S. cost of production and operating rates. It's how long does Canada continue to block Russian goods? That could be a help in the short term if Canada just all of a sudden said, don't worry about it for fertilizer. Go ahead, go back to doing business. And then ultimately, how do you guys respond to the price? There are breakpoints. We saw more demand destruction last fall than I think we've ever seen. Spring could blow that one out of the water with the way this thing is set up. You guys get a say, and you say it with your checkbooks. If you say, I'm not going to put it on, I'm just going to mine the soil, that is a statement. Unfortunately, I don't think it has the impact that it usually would. So I'm not going to guarantee this, and I want nothing more than to be wrong on this singular statement. But with everything going on in the world, a person can make a very, very strong argument that today's values may be some of the best that we see for phosphate all year. I don't think that will be the case, but with everything going on in the world, if this stuff doesn't correct, it always seems to, but if it does not correct, it's very hard to paint a picture on why prices fall. Canadian imports, you guys were sitting fine through December. Everything was looking pretty good. But again, we are moving into our most important period. Will those flows continue with everything going on overseas? Potash, we'll end with this. I'm going to end on a good note. You didn't think that was possible, did you? Potash is the one market that, globally speaking, looks very well supplied to us, and the outlook continues to look even better than it is today. And when you look at the price of potash, yeah, we had that massive spike in 21, 22. We thought we were losing Russia and everything else going on around the world. But of all the manufacturers for fertilizer, the potash ones that did right by the farmer. They put the price low, and the price has been relatively flat ever since. And now there are some watch points that we've got to do, right? If the U.S. sanctions Russia, that could create even more reliance on Canadian goods. If our demand on Canadian goods is even more, that's going to help raise the domestic price up here. Again, what happens with one happens with the other. Number two, if Trump just decides, hey, I'm going to go ahead and tariff you guys again. There's a lot of people in the world we can fight. I don't know why we're fighting you, but he seems to like it. But if we do that, if we sit there and say, well, fine, Canada, we don't want your goods anymore, well, that just means there's more goods here for you guys. That should help lower the domestic pricing. So our policies have an impact here. Globally speaking, potash exporters, there's not a lot of them as far as major ones. You guys sit atop the pile. You are the leading potash manufacturing country, and your product is already the most produced, and it's getting better with some of the mines and some of the expansions that are coming. Laos, globally speaking, there's more production coming down the road. China's investing heavily in Laos. They don't want to buy Canadian product. They want to buy from local. They want to expand that sphere of influence so they have more support if they decide to go after Taiwan. And what better way to do that than invest in your neighbors? So that's going to be bigger. Russia, some of these are delayed due to war, but they're trying to increase it. U.S., we've put money into the potash market. For the life of me, I don't understand why. We need help in phosphate. We need help in nitrogen. So yeah, sure, let's go put it in the one fertilizer that actually is well supplied and well priced. But we're producing more. And the biggest thing in Canada is this BHP mine in Jansen. This would add millions of tons of capacity every year. So there's a lot of potash supply already out there, and there's more product that's coming. But watch the U.S. relations with Canada, with Russia. Watch Canadian relations with Russia. Spring demand versus supplies. I still think supplies are more than plentiful. Maybe demand will be bigger because the price is quote unquote decent. But that could help prop up some prices just short term, logistically speaking. And then how quickly can we get this new production coming? But potash to me should continue to be the bright spot. It is very, very well supplied. A well supplied market means less volatility and a tendency towards lower pricing. Don't need to worry about you guys' imports because you export everything. And again, production, I always show this and everybody in DC is like, oh, we need more production. No, we don't, because if you sit there and overlay what we import from Canada, and again, that whole idea that North America is one market, we're fine. We don't need production. We do not need to do anything in the U.S. that doesn't make sense. Just keep our borders open, keep us in good relations with President Trump, and we'll be fine. And again, as far as that price versus the grain values, and this is across every single one of them, potash is the only one that makes any sense. We'll skip over that. Skip over this real quick. Last thoughts. Fertilizer prices are high around the world. Like I said, the goal was to sit there and show you all the stuff in the world that's going on that dictates our prices. Unfortunately, there's more happening today than we've probably ever seen in the fertilizer space. Volatility is literally going to be your only constant in this changing world. When there's going to be opportunities, you've got to jump on them when they're there. They may not be there very long. They may be here today, gone tomorrow. But I had somebody show me this in a little bit different format. On the left-hand side, as farmers, again, I'm talking from a family perspective, we think this is where we make our money. Outside, working on our equipment, fix the planter, fix the toolbar, work on the tractor if you've got the ability. That's where we think we make our money. Guys, your operations are worth more than most of the companies across North America. And whether you like it or not, you are a CEO. You are still the farmer on the left. And this is a great thing to be. This is what everybody aspires to be. This is what the younger generation wants to be. At your desk on the computer, watching world events, watching prices, staying up to date with your replacement and your sales price and everything else. This is where we need to be more often. We've got to be on top of it, right? We've got to be thirsty for knowledge. We've got to know what's pushing and pulling the price so we know what to watch for. I'm not saying don't do this on the left, but we need to spend more time with this on the right. This is how we survive the new age of farming. So guys, that's my depressing news for fertilizer.